I had exactly $413 to my name the morning I finally understood why my life kept feeling like it was shrinking. Not metaphorically, literally. I was recovering from knee surgery, balancing my laptop on an upside-down laundry basket in a damp converted garage I rented month to month behind a duplex in Portland, Oregon, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with congratulations for a home I had never seen. The buzzing started when my great-aunt Eleanor texted, "So proud of you, sweetheart. That $85,000 should have made your first place feel safe. We'll toast tonight." Attached was a photo of a handwritten note on creamy stationery, my name spelled correctly, which somehow made it worse. Tucked beside the note was something else, a small key fob stamped with my late mother's initials. Eleanor had mailed it to me for nostalgia. When I turned it over, a seam caught the light. It wasn't just a key fob, it was a USB drive. I set it on the table like it might bite. My leg throbbed under the brace, and I could feel that familiar, humiliating heat behind my eyes, the one that came from being the only person in the room who didn't know what everyone else was talking about. I didn't cry. I put the phone face down. I stared at the ceiling where the garage rafters were exposed like ribs. And I thought, if Eleanor believes she gave me $85,000, then someone in my family has been performing a play in my name. I hadn't planned to blow up anything. I just wanted the truth. But I also knew this. Eleanor's annual fundraiser was tonight, and half of my family would be there in tuxedos and satin like they'd been personally invited to be decent. And if I was going to be treated like a character in their story, I would at least take control of the ending. I didn't know it yet, but that little USB, and what was hidden inside it, would force a bank to print receipts, a lawyer to file an emergency motion, and a judge to freeze assets before my father could move the money again. Let me take you back. When my mom died, I was 19 and still the kind of girl who believed that grief was something you moved through in a straight line, like a tunnel. I didn't know it could loop back on you in grocery store aisles and parking lots and old songs. I didn't know how quiet a house could get when the person who made it feel livable was gone. My father, Russell, didn't fall apart the way people expect. He did something worse. He got efficient. He started speaking in practicalities. He donated her clothes before I could smell her perfume one last time. He changed the locks because security. He asked me, 2 days after the funeral, if I was going to do something useful with my life, or if I planned to float around like a hobby. My younger brother, Evan, had always been the bright spot in my father's eyes. Golden child wasn't a label we used out loud, but you could see it in the way Dad's voice softened when Evan walked into a room, and hardened when I did. Evan got grace. I got lectures. I left for community college on scholarships and stubbornness. I worked nights as an EMT and days in class until my hands smelled like latex and coffee all the time. I tried to call Dad when I got my first certification. He didn't pick up. When I finally reached him, he said, "That's not a career. That's a phase." Eleanor, my mom's aunt, my great-aunt, was the one who mailed me a card with a check for $200 and a short note. "Buy yourself something you don't need." I spent it on a thrift store desk and a lamp. I cried when the lamp worked. Eleanor was old Portland money, quiet, deliberate, and terrifyingly calm. She funded community projects, sat on boards, and had a kind of influence that didn't require raising her voice. People leaned toward her when she spoke, like her words might contain instructions. She liked me because I didn't flatter her. I answered her questions. I showed up when she invited me to tea, even when I was exhausted. She once said, "You have your mother's spine." I'm relieved. After college, my knee injury happened in a way that felt almost comically unfair. I was helping lift a patient down 3 flights of stairs during a power outage, an actual blackout, the kind Portland gets during windstorms, and my foot slipped. My knee twisted and pain flashed so bright I saw white. Surgery wasn't optional. Recovery wasn't quick. I couldn't work shifts. My savings evaporated in co-pays and rent. My father called once during that time, not to ask how I was, but to tell me I should rethink my life choices. "You don't have a cushion because you don't plan," he said, as if I hadn't planned every hour of my 20s like a military operation. "You need to stop expecting handouts." I remember gripping my phone and looking around my tiny garage apartment. The portable heater, the damp smell, the single window that faced a fence, and realizing he genuinely thought he was delivering wisdom. It was one of the first times I noticed the pattern. His cruelty came in a calm voice, like it was reasonable, like I was supposed to accept it as weather. 6 months later, Eleanor invited me to her annual fundraiser at the Portland Art Museum. It was a black tie event, expensive enough that people practiced being generous. "I'm announcing something new this year," she said over the phone. "Come, sit near the front. Wear something you feel like yourself in." I almost didn't go. I hated those rooms. I hated the way my family became glossy in public and sharp in private. But Eleanor was one of the few people who had made me feel like I wasn't a burden. So I said yes. A week before the fundraiser, my father suddenly became friendly. He texted me, "Proud of you. Eleanor says you're doing well. Let's catch up." I stared at the message for a long time. It didn't sound like him. It sounded like a costume. Then, later that day, my brother Evan sent me a selfie in a new condo gym. Behind him, mirrored walls and sleek equipment gleamed. Caption, "Adulting LOL." I asked where he was. He replied, "Downtown. Dad helped me snag a place. You'll get there." I didn't answer. My stomach did something sour and slow. I had spent years telling myself that my father's neglect was just emotional, words, attitude, favoritism. But money leaves tracks. Money has receipts. Money changes things in ways you can measure. That's why Eleanor's text the morning of the gala, the one about $85,000, landed like a weight in my hands. Because it wasn't just that my family didn't help me. It was that someone had been claiming they did. I sat up carefully, knee brace creaking. My garage felt colder than usual, the kind of damp chill that never fully leaves. I opened Eleanor's text again and zoomed in on the photo. The note said, "For Marin's first home, love, Eleanor." And beside it, the key fob with my mom's initials. My mom had a key fob like that. She kept it on a brass hook by the door, always. It was one of those objects that becomes part of the architecture of your childhood. After she died, it vanished. I assumed my father threw it away with everything else that didn't serve his new efficiency. I picked up the key fob and pressed my thumbnail along the seam again. It clicked open. Inside, a tiny USB drive. My pulse picked up, not from excitement, more like dread. Like my body knew before my mind did that I was about to see something I couldn't unsee. I plugged the USB into my laptop. It showed one folder. No title, just a date, 04/18. Inside were 3 files. A PDF labeled, "Condo Gift Letter, Marin L." A scanned bank transfer receipt. And a short video file, grainy and slightly tilted, like it had been recorded casually. My throat went tight. I clicked the PDF first. It was a gift letter, the kind lenders sometimes require to verify that down payment money isn't a loan. It had Eleanor's signature at the bottom, but something about it felt off. The text was formal, almost too formal, and the font was inconsistent in one line, just slightly. The address listed under my name wasn't mine. It wasn't even a residential address. It was a business suite downtown. I opened the bank transfer receipt. It was real. Eleanor's account number partially masked, the amount clear, $85,000 transferred to an account with my father's name. Memo. Marin Housing. My mouth went dry. I clicked the video. It showed Eleanor sitting at her dining table, sunlight on her hands. She looked slightly younger, her hair still more chestnut than silver. She was speaking to someone off camera. "I'm wiring it to Russell," she said, matter of fact. He insisted it would be faster. He said Marin would be embarrassed if I sent it directly. He's her father. He should do one good thing without making her beg. The camera shifted, like the person holding it adjusted their grip. I heard a woman laugh softly. "And you trust him?" the off-camera voice asked. Eleanor's expression tightened, just for a second. "I trust paper," she said. "That's why I'm recording this. If I ever start losing my sharpness, this is proof." Then she slid a folder across the table. "Canary clause," she said quietly, like it tasted bitter. "If anyone in the family touches what they shouldn't, it triggers an automatic audit of the trust." The video ended. My hands had gone numb. My laptop hummed like it was the only calm thing in the room. A canary clause. I'd heard the term once, vaguely, in a finance podcast, something hidden in a trust document designed to sing if wrongdoing occurs. Not common, but not unheard of among people who'd been betrayed before. I replayed Eleanor's words. "If I ever start losing my sharpness, this is proof." My vulnerability wasn't just my knee. It was my position. No savings, no family safety net. A recovering body and a life held together with cheap duct tape. And someone had taken advantage of that. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from my father. "Big night. Eleanor's proud. Don't be late." I stared at the message until the letters stopped looking like words. Then I did something that felt unlike me. I opened a new email draft and typed one line to Eleanor. "I need to talk to you before tonight. It's urgent." I hit send. Within 2 minutes, she called. "Marin," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a tightness in it I hadn't heard before. "Tell me you're not in trouble." "I'm not sure," I said honestly. My throat cracked on the last word, which annoyed me. I hated sounding small. She didn't ask what I meant. She said, "Come to my house, now." "My knee? I'll send a driver," she cut in, gentle but immovable. "And bring the USB." I paused. "You knew about the USB?" "I knew about the key fob," she said. "Your mother gave it to me the week she got sick. She said, 'If Russell ever turns strange, you'll know what to do.'" I didn't understand at the time. My stomach turned. My mother had known, or at least suspected. Eleanor exhaled once, slow. "Listen carefully. Tonight, if you walk into that museum and you don't have the right documents, your father will control the narrative." "What narrative?" I asked, though I already knew. "The one where he is the responsible parent," she said. "And you are the difficult daughter, the ungrateful one, the one who received help and wasted it." My leg pulsed. I clenched my jaw. Eleanor continued, "We will not let him do that, but we do it properly. We do it with evidence." Then her voice sharpened, just slightly. "Because if you miss this, you lose everything." The driver picked me up 20 minutes later. I watched Portland slide by through the window. Wet sidewalks, coffee shops, gray sky pressed low. Everything looked normal, which felt obscene. Eleanor's house sat in the West Hills, quiet and old, with a view of the city like it was a painting. When I arrived, her assistant ushered me in without speaking. Eleanor was waiting in her study, a room lined with books that smelled like leather and dust. She didn't hug me. She didn't offer tea. She held out her hand for the USB drive. I gave it to her. She put on reading glasses, inserted it into her desktop, and opened the files one by one without expression. When she reached the bank transfer receipt, she went still. When she watched the video of herself talking about the canary clause, something flickered across her face. Recognition, grief, anger, all controlled. "That was 2 years ago," she said quietly. "You gave him $85,000? I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "He told everyone I got an apartment." Eleanor nodded once, slow. He told me you sent a thank you note, she said. I remember thinking your handwriting looked strange. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a note on creamy stationery, signed with my name. It wasn't my handwriting. I stared at it, feeling something cold sink in my chest. That's not... I know, Eleanor said. Her voice went flat. Russell forged it. I swallowed. Why would he do that? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she clicked on the PDF again, zooming in on the line where my address was listed. That isn't a condo address, she murmured. It's a commercial suite. She turned to her assistant. Call Howard. Howard arrived an hour later, which told me everything I needed to know about Eleanor's orbit. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that looked expensive without trying. He shook my hand firmly and looked me in the eye like I wasn't a kid. I'm Howard Lynn, he said. Eleanor tells me you may have been defrauded. The word, defrauded, landed like a gavel in my stomach. Howard sat at Eleanor's desk and laid out a legal pad. We're going to speak in precise terms, he said. Because precision keeps you safe. He pointed to the bank transfer receipt. This is evidence of the transfer. We'll request the official bank records, but this is a strong starting point. He pointed to the forged thank you note. That's potential forgery. It matters because it shows intent. He pointed to the PDF gift letter. This is interesting, he said, opening properties on the file. He clicked through a menu and frowned. Metadata, he said, noticing my blank look. It's like the file's fingerprints. It can tell us when it was created, what software edited it, sometimes even the username of the person who edited it. He turned the screen slightly toward me. This PDF was modified on a device registered to Russell Lenovo 2 days after Eleanor's transfer. My throat tightened. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see the proof neatly labeled like a tag on a piece of meat. Howard continued. Now, Eleanor mentioned a canary clause. Eleanor opened a thick binder on her desk, trust documents, neatly tabbed. Howard explained, a canary clause is a provision in a trust that triggers consequences, often an audit or a reduction of inheritance, if a beneficiary challenges the trust or engages in misconduct. It's designed to discourage bad behavior and smoke out fraud. Eleanor's eyes didn't leave the page. It triggers a forensic audit if any agent misrepresents a transfer, she said. Howard nodded. And Russell has been acting as Eleanor's financial agent in some matters? Yes, Eleanor said. For convenience. Or what I thought was convenience. Howard's pen tapped once. Then we can invoke it. That gives us leverage, not emotional leverage, legal leverage. My father's phone text flashed in my mind. Don't be late. Like he was managing me. Like I was still something he owned. Howard looked at me. Marin, I want to be clear. If this money was intended for you and diverted without your consent, that's not family drama. That can be theft. Possibly fraud, possibly elder financial abuse, depending on facts. I flinched at elder. Eleanor was sharp, but the video proved she'd already been thinking about decline. Eleanor's jaw tightened. He used my trust in him to lie. That's enough. Howard nodded, then said, We need bank records today, and we need to ensure Russell can't move assets before we act. How? I asked. Howard's eyes were steady. We can seek an asset freeze, a court order that prevents someone from transferring or disposing of assets during an investigation. We'll also draft an affidavit. I blinked. What's that? A sworn written statement, he said. You sign it under penalty of perjury. It tells your story with facts and dates. Judges respect affidavits when they're clean and supported. Eleanor's assistant spoke up softly. The gala is tonight. Howard's gaze flicked to Eleanor, then back to me. He said, Good. That's your public set piece. My stomach dropped. You want me to confront him there? Howard shook his head. No, you're not going to scream in a museum. You're going to let him hang himself with his own assumptions. Eleanor finally looked at me. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something steel. Marin, she said quietly, your father has been using your silence as permission. I swallowed. My flaw, my realistic flaw, was that I avoided confrontation like it was a disease. I believed stupidly that if I stayed calm, if I worked harder, if I didn't make waves, things would eventually settle. But waves don't settle when someone keeps throwing rocks. Howard slid a folder toward me. We'll start here. Timeline, dates, messages, any mention of the apartment. I hesitated, then pulled out my phone and opened years of texts from my father. The lectures, the dismissals, the occasional performative proud of you when someone important might be watching. Eleanor watched me scroll. He never asked about your living situation, she said softly. It wasn't a question, it was an observation. No, I admitted. He called it character building when I told him my landlord's heater didn't work. Howard's pen moved. Good, that's relevant. My leg began to ache harder, and I realized my hands were shaking. Not fear. Rage held in too long. Eleanor stood. We'll go to the bank now. At the bank, a manager escorted us into a glass office. Eleanor's presence changed the air. People spoke more carefully around her. The manager pulled up records. She frowned as she scrolled. I see the transfer, she said. $85,000 to Russell Langford, Memo Marin Housing. My pulse hammered. Then she clicked again. 5 days later, the full amount was moved into an account titled Langford Property Holdings, LLC. My breath caught. That's a business, I whispered. Howard nodded. An LLC, limited liability company. People use them for legitimate reasons, like owning rental properties. But they can also be used to obscure personal transfers. Eleanor's mouth tightened. He made a company with my gift. The manager hesitated. There's more. She clicked. A property purchase appeared 2 weeks after that. Not a condo for me. A duplex in North Portland, owned by Langford Property Holdings, LLC. I felt my face go cold. Howard said quietly, We'll need printed copies. The manager nodded. I can provide transaction histories and the wire confirmation. Eleanor's voice was calm. Do it. When the manager left, Howard leaned toward me. This is where your father will try to rewrite history, he said. He will claim it was a loan, or a misunderstanding, or that he was holding it for you. My throat tightened, because it sounded exactly like him. Howard continued, So we don't argue feelings, we argue facts, paper, dates, signatures, metadata. Eleanor's hand rested on the desk, steady. And the canary clause, she said. Howard nodded. And the canary clause. On the drive back, rain thickened. Portland's sky turned darker, the way it does when a storm decides to commit. Eleanor's assistant checked her phone. Weather alert, she murmured. Wind advisory, possible outages. Eleanor didn't react. She stared out the window like she was already somewhere else. Howard spoke again, and his tone shifted to something practical and sharp. Tonight, he said, Russell will likely be there. If he believes his story is intact, he may speak freely. I swallowed. He'll act like he helped me. Yes, Howard said, and that's useful. Eleanor finally turned toward me. You don't have to say much, she said, just enough to keep the loop open. The loop open. I knew what she meant. Let him talk. Let him commit to the lie. That afternoon, Howard drafted my affidavit. He asked me questions gently but precisely. Where do you live? Behind a duplex, converted garage, no insulation. Since when? 2 years. Before that, a basement unit. 4 years. Did Russell provide you money for housing? No. Did Russell tell you about Eleanor's transfer? No. Do you have text evidence of Russell discouraging you from seeking help? Yes. Howard nodded. We include that, not because it proves theft, but because it proves pattern. When I signed the affidavit, my hand trembled. Howard noticed, but didn't comment. Then he slid another document across the desk to Eleanor. This revokes Russell's authority as your agent, he said. Notarized, effective immediately. Eleanor signed without hesitation. She looked at me and said, once, quietly, "This isn't revenge. This is justice." By evening, I was dressed in the only black dress I owned, a simple, knee-length one I'd bought on clearance years ago. My brace fit under it awkwardly. I wore flats. My hair was pinned back with trembling fingers. Eleanor arrived in a deep green gown that looked like it had been made for her specifically. She didn't wear flashy jewelry. She didn't need to. The Portland Art Museum glowed inside like warm light behind glass. Valets moved with rehearsed speed. People laughed too loudly at the entrance like they were proving they belonged. Inside, the fundraiser was already in motion. There were silent auction tables, sleek signage, servers with trays of champagne. And then I saw my father. Russell stood near a donor wall, hand on Evan's shoulder, laughing. He looked polished, confident, like a man who thought the world made sense because he'd arranged it that way. Evan looked uncomfortable in a suit, but he was smiling, still eager to be the good son. My father's eyes found me, and his expression brightened with performative warmth. "Marin," he called, as if we were close. He strode toward me with his arms open, stopping just short of touching me. There she is, downtown girl. I felt something inside me tighten, then go still. Eleanor approached at my side. Russell's smile widened when he saw her. "Aunt Eleanor," he said smoothly, "you look incredible. Thank you again for everything you do. The city needs you." Eleanor smiled politely. "Russell." The way she said his name was a temperature drop. Russell looked between us. "I was just telling Evan how proud I am of Marin," he said, loud enough for nearby donors to hear. "She's really settled in." "Settled in where?" Eleanor asked calmly. Russell didn't miss a beat. "Her place, the one you helped with. She's been thriving." My heart hammered behind my ribs. Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "Has she?" Russell laughed. "You know Marin. She doesn't like making a fuss. She didn't even want me to tell anyone." Eleanor's eyes stayed on his. "Russell," she said gently, "tell me again how you handled that transfer." He shrugged like it was nothing. "Simple. You wired it to me, I deposited it, and then I coordinated everything. Helped her find a place, got her a good rate. The market was insane, but we did it." He leaned toward a donor couple nearby, smiling. "Family, right?" The donor couple chuckled politely, clearly not sure what they were laughing at. I kept my face neutral. I forced my hands to stop shaking by interlacing my fingers in front of me. I could feel sweat at the base of my neck. Eleanor said, "And the condo is in Marin's name?" Russell's smile flickered. "Barely." Then he recovered. "Well," he said, "we set it up smartly, for tax purposes. You know, a holding structure. Marin doesn't need the burden." Howard had warned me. He would talk like this, like he was protecting me, like he was the architect of my life. Eleanor nodded slowly. "A holding structure," she repeated. "Interesting." Russell gestured to Evan. "Evan's doing great too. He just got into that new place downtown. It's important to build equity young." My stomach twisted. My flaw, avoidance, rose in me like a reflex. The urge to shrink, to let it pass, to not create a scene. But Eleanor's hand touched my elbow lightly, not pushing, just anchoring. I heard myself speak, calmly. "Dad, what's the address of my condo?" Russell blinked, a fraction too long. He smiled. You know, over by the river. Marin, don't do this here. I held his gaze. I live behind a duplex, I said quietly, in a garage. The air around us shifted. Not dramatic, just attention. People's faces turned, like sunflowers sensing a change in light. Russell's smile tightened. Marin, he said, low now. Stop. Eleanor's voice stayed calm. Russell, she said, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want a direct answer. Russell's jaw flexed. Where did my $85,000 go? Russell laughed once, too high, too fast. Eleanor, come on, this is... Before he could finish, the lights flickered. A low murmur rippled through the room. The storm had arrived like a decision. Wind rattled the museum's tall windows, then the power went out. For a moment, there was only dim emergency lighting. People froze, unsure whether to treat it as an inconvenience or a crisis. In the soft dark, Eleanor's voice was steady. Howard. Howard stepped forward as if he'd been waiting for this exact cue, because he had. He raised his phone, and in the emergency glow, he displayed a screen toward Russell. Russell Langford, Howard said clearly, not loud, just confident. I represent Eleanor Hart. You are hereby notified that your authority to act on her behalf has been revoked, effective immediately. Russell's face went pale. What? Howard continued. We also have bank documentation showing the transfer of $85,000 intended for Marin Langford's housing was diverted into Langford Property Holdings LLC and used to purchase a duplex. The room, half lit, went quiet in a different way now. Not polite quiet. Listening quiet. Russell's mouth opened, closed. He glanced around as if looking for someone to save him from the moment. Evan's face had drained of color. My father tried to recover. This is inappropriate, he said. We can talk privately. Eleanor's tone sharpened, still controlled. No, you have been private for years. A donor's phone flashlight clicked on, then another. The room filled with small beams of light, like people couldn't help themselves. They needed to see. Howard held up a folder. We're not discussing feelings, he said. We're discussing documentation, transaction histories, a forged thank you note, metadata showing you modified a gift letter. Russell's eyes snapped to me. For the first time all night, his expression wasn't charming. It was cold. You did this, he hissed under his breath. I met his gaze. My voice stayed calm. You did this, I corrected. A museum staff member hurried over, whispering about backup generators. Another employee spoke into a radio. In the background, the fundraiser's DJ booth had gone dark, the music cut. The outage felt like the building itself had decided it was time to stop providing ambiance for lies. When the backup generator hummed on and lights returned in stages, it was like a spotlight returning to a stage mid-confession. Eleanor turned slightly, addressing the cluster of people who had gathered. I'm sorry for the disruption, she said, voice carrying, but I won't allow my name to be used as a mask for wrongdoing. Russell stepped forward, face tight. Eleanor, you don't understand. Marin didn't want help. Howard cut in smoothly. We have texts showing Russell told Marin to stop expecting handouts while he controlled funds intended for her. The affidavit is signed. Russell's eyes darted toward the exits like a trapped man calculating angles. Eleanor's gaze was steady. Russell, she said, did you forge a letter in Marin's name to me? Russell's lips pressed together. Silence. Eleanor nodded as if she'd expected it. Thank you. Someone near the silent auction table whispered, Oh my God. Russell turned toward the whisper like he could intimidate it into disappearing. Then, unexpectedly, a woman stepped out from the crowd. She was in a navy dress, hair pinned back, expression composed. She held a small clutch tightly. Russell's face changed when he saw her. Not fear, exactly, something like dread. "Leah," he said, voice strained. Leah looked at him without warmth. "Hi, Russell." I blinked. I knew that face from old photos. A face my father had erased from conversation. Leah was his first wife, Evan's mother, not mine. My mind raced. Ally identity twist. It hit me all at once. The person holding the camera in Eleanor's old video, the soft laugh, might have been Leah. Leah turned toward Eleanor. "Ms. Hart," she said, "I'm sorry to intrude, but I can confirm Russell has used holding structures before." Russell's jaw clenched. "Leah, don't." Leah's voice stayed calm. "He did it to me," she said. "He moved money into an LLC during our divorce and said it was for the family." Evan's head snapped toward his mother, shock on his face. Leah continued, still calm. "I didn't speak up then because I wanted peace for my son. But when I heard tonight was about Marin, I couldn't stay quiet." Russell looked like he might explode, but he didn't dare. Not with donors watching. Eleanor nodded once, slow. "Thank you, Leah." Russell's voice turned desperate. "This is not what it looks like." Howard's tone was polite, almost bored. "It looks like bank records." Russell's eyes flicked again toward the exit. Howard said, "If you leave, we file immediately for an emergency restraining order preventing you from approaching Eleanor regarding finances." Russell froze. "A restraining order?" he scoffed. Howard didn't blink. "In this context, it's a civil protective order. It limits contact to prevent harassment or coercion. It protects an elder from pressure." The donor couple near us shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing this had crossed into legal territory. Eleanor spoke again, quietly. "Russell, you will meet us tomorrow morning at Howard's office. You will bring every document related to Langford Property Holdings LLC, and you will not move $1. Russell's face flushed. "You can't control me." Eleanor's smile was small. "Watch me." He stared at her, then at me, then at the crowd. He realized he'd lost the room. He leaned close to me, voice low and sharp. "You were always ungrateful." I looked at him. My voice stayed even. "You were always hungry." And then I stepped back. The rest of the gala went on in a strange, fragile way. People trying to return to donations and art and hors d'oeuvres, while a man's reputation bled out quietly on the floor of reality. I left early with Eleanor and Howard. My knee hurt. My body felt like it had run a marathon without moving. In the car, Eleanor stared out at the wet streets. "I should have checked," she said, voice rough for the first time. I swallowed. "I should have fought sooner." Eleanor turned to me. "No," she said. "Your survival isn't a moral failure." The next morning, Howard's office smelled like coffee and paper. Russell arrived late, dressed like he was going to a business meeting. He walked in with his chin high. He saw Leah seated quietly in the corner, and his face tightened. "You brought her," he said to Eleanor, voice sharp. Eleanor didn't react. "Sit." Russell sat. He placed a folder on the table like a peace offering. Howard opened it, scanned quickly, then looked up. "This is incomplete," he said. Russell's smile was thin. "That's what I have." Howard slid a printed bank record across the table. "No," he said. "This is what you have, and this shows additional transfers after the duplex purchase. Money moved out of the LLC into a brokerage account." Russell's eyes flicked down, then up. "Investments." Howard nodded. "Yes, investments made with funds earmarked as a gift for Marin's housing." Russell leaned back, trying to regain control. "I was holding it. For her. She's impulsive." I felt heat rise in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. "Name one impulsive thing I've done in my life." Russell's mouth opened, closed. He didn't have an answer that wouldn't expose him. Howard turned a page. "We're filing for a temporary asset freeze today," he said. "It's an emergency motion. The judge will consider it because we have documentation of transfers, evidence of forgery, and a credible concern you'll move assets. Russell's face reddened. You can't. Howard's tone stayed calm. We can, and we will. Eleanor slid another document forward. And this, she said, is the notice triggering the canary clause in my trust. Russell blinked. What? Howard explained. When the canary clause is triggered, an independent forensic accountant conducts a forensic audit, a detailed investigation of financial records designed to detect fraud or misuse. Russell laughed, brittle. Eleanor, you're going to destroy the family over paperwork? Eleanor's eyes were cold. You destroyed it by lying. Russell's gaze snapped toward Evan, who had been silent in the doorway, looking like he wished he could disappear. You're going to let them do this? Russell demanded. Evan's throat bobbed. He looked at me, then at Leah, then at Eleanor. He spoke quietly. Dad, did you really take money meant for Marin? Russell's eyes flashed. I did what I had to do. Evan's face crumpled, not dramatically, just like something inside him finally gave way. Leah spoke softly. That's not an answer, Evan. Russell turned on Leah. You're here to poison him. Leah's expression didn't change. No, she said. You did that. Howard tapped his pen once. Russell, we're offering you a choice, he said. You can sign a repayment agreement, structured, enforceable, returning the full $85,000 to Marin within 6 months. You'll also sign a statement acknowledging the funds were intended as a gift for Marin's housing. If you don't, we proceed with litigation. Russell scoffed. A repayment agreement? Howard nodded. It's enforceable like a contract. If you violate it, we can seek judgment. Russell's jaw clenched. And if I sign, you drop it? Howard's eyes were steady. We pause litigation contingent on compliance. The forensic audit still proceeds under the canary clause. Russell stared at the table, calculating. I saw something in his eyes then that I hadn't wanted to see for years. Not love, not concern, not even resentment. Entitlement. He believed that money moving through his hands became his by default. He believed that fatherhood was ownership. Eleanor said, Russell, you will also resign from my foundation board. Russell's head snapped up. You can't. Eleanor's voice was soft. I can, and I will. Russell's lips pressed into a line. He looked at Evan again, like he was reaching for a lever. Evan didn't move. Russell finally picked up the pen Howard offered. He signed. As he did, Howard slid another folder toward Eleanor. This is the second packet from the bank, he said. We requested the full wire trail. It came in this morning. Eleanor opened it, flipped through, and then went still. I leaned closer. My stomach dropped. There was another transfer I hadn't seen. A smaller one. $12,000. Memo. Eleanor Medical. Transferred from Eleanor's account into Russell's personal account, months after the $85,000. I looked at Eleanor. Her hand tightened on the paper. Howard's voice was quiet. This appears unrelated to Marin's housing, but it suggests a broader pattern. Eleanor's eyes hardened. He took money for my medical, she said, voice flat. Russell's face went blank. That was... Howard cut him off. We can stop here, he said, or we can keep going. Eleanor exhaled once, slow. Then she said the line that landed like a door closing. The second folder changed everything. Russell swallowed. The color left his face. Howard stood. We're filing today. Russell's voice turned thin. You can't do this to me. Eleanor looked at him. You did it to yourself. 3 days later, we were in court. I sat beside Howard, knee braced, hands folded tightly. Eleanor sat behind us, her posture straight. Leah sat near the back, quiet and present. Evan wasn't there. Howard said it was better. less pressure on him. Russell walked in with a different lawyer than Howard, a younger man, slightly frantic. Russell looked like he hadn't slept. His suit hung a little looser. His confidence had a crack in it. When the judge entered, the courtroom stood. The air felt dry and tense. Howard spoke first, calm and organized. He presented the wire transfers, the LLC formation documents, the property purchase record, the metadata evidence showing Russell's device had modified the gift letter, and the forged thank you note. He explained each piece with clarity, never exaggerating. Then he presented my affidavit, my sworn statement of where I'd lived, what I'd been told, and what I hadn't been told. Russell's lawyer argued that the funds were managed and intended for future use, that there was no malicious intent, that family matters shouldn't be litigated. Howard didn't flinch. He said, "Your Honor, this is not a vague misunderstanding. This is a clear diversion of earmarked funds into an LLC for property acquisition. We are requesting a temporary restraining order and asset freeze to prevent further dissipation while the forensic audit proceeds." The judge looked down at the documents, then up at Russell. "Mr. Langford," she said, "did you receive $85,000 intended for your daughter's housing?" Russell's jaw flexed. He glanced at his lawyer. The judge repeated, slower, "Yes or no?" Russell's voice was tight. "Yes. And did you use it to purchase a duplex under an LLC in your name?" Russell swallowed. "Yes." A pause. The judge's eyes narrowed. "And did your daughter receive the benefit of that money?" Russell's mouth opened, closed. His lawyer whispered something urgently. Russell's voice came out strained. "Not directly." The courtroom went silent. Not dramatic, not movie-like. Just that collective, heavy quiet when the truth finally becomes official. The judge looked at Howard. "Motion granted," she said. "Temporary asset freeze approved. Mr. Langford, you are prohibited from transferring assets from Langford Property Holdings LLC and related accounts pending further review. A temporary restraining order is granted regarding contact with Ms. Hart about financial matters. The forensic audit proceeds." Russell's face collapsed into something small. He looked at me once, and in that look I saw anger, yes, but also something like disbelief that I had stopped being pliable. Outside the courthouse, rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but lighter. Eleanor stood beside me on the steps. She didn't touch me. She didn't need to. Howard spoke quietly. "This isn't the end," he said. "Asset freeze is step 1. The repayment agreement is step 2. The audit will uncover the rest." Eleanor nodded. "I want my foundation protected," she said. Howard nodded. "We'll restructure, make the trust irrevocable in certain parts, tighten trustee powers, reduce discretionary authority." I blinked. "Irrevocable?" Howard glanced at me. "An irrevocable trust is one that generally can't be easily changed once established," he explained. "It adds protection because no single person can quietly rewrite terms." Eleanor's voice was steady. "Russell will never hold that kind of power again." I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt clear. A week later, Eleanor asked me to move into her guest suite temporarily, while my knee healed and while we looked for an apartment, one actually in my name, with actual windows, with a lease that didn't require cash shoved into an envelope. I resisted at first. My reflex to not be a burden rose up. Eleanor looked at me and said, "Your independence has been weaponized against you. Let it rest." So I moved in. Evan came by one evening, alone. He stood awkwardly in Eleanor's kitchen, hands shoved in his pockets. "I didn't know," he said quietly. I didn't answer immediately because I didn't know what he deserved from me. Evan swallowed. "I believed him. About you. He said you didn't want help because you were proud. He said you looked down on us." I stared at him. My voice stayed calm. "And did that make sense to you?" Evan flinched. Not really, he admitted. But it was easier. I nodded once. That was the whole sickness. Easier stories are seductive. Evan looked down. My condo, he said, voice cracking slightly. It's under that LLC too. I blinked. What? He nodded miserably. I thought Dad was being smart. He said it was for taxes. Howard had warned about broader patterns. Here it was. Evan's voice was quiet. Am I complicit? I exhaled. You were used, I said. But you still have choices. Evan nodded slowly. What do I do? I looked him in the eye. Tell the truth, I said, even if it costs you comfort. 2 months later, Russell began repaying the $85,000 as required. Not because he suddenly found his conscience, because the asset freeze and legal pressure left him no other clean exit. The forensic audit uncovered more. The $12,000 medical transfer, a series of smaller withdrawals, and evidence that Russell had attempted to shift funds between accounts when he sensed scrutiny. The audit report was clinical and damning. Eleanor restructured her foundation and trust. Russell was removed from any position of authority. The canary clause didn't just sing, it screamed. Russell's social circle changed overnight. Board invitations dried up. People stopped returning his calls, not because they were moral heroes, but because association with fraud is inconvenient when you live on reputation. Evan moved out of the condo and into a rental under his own name. Leah helped him. That part surprised me. How quietly, steadily she showed up when it mattered. My own life shifted in ways that didn't look dramatic from the outside, but felt huge inside. I moved into a small apartment in the Pearl District. Light, simple, clean. Real windows. Hardwood floors. A kitchen that didn't smell like mildew. On my first morning there, I woke up to actual sunlight on my face. I lay still for a minute because I wasn't used to waking up without bracing for noise. Then I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. I'd been postponing my career pivot for years, telling myself I'd return to design when things were stable. But stability had always been a mirage I chased while other people stole behind my back. So I applied to UX roles, quietly, consistently. I built a portfolio from scratch, using projects that reflected what I actually understood. Small spaces, resourcefulness, making systems work when the world doesn't. One afternoon, I got an email from a nonprofit architecture firm. They were launching a housing navigation app for low-income families. They needed someone who could design with empathy and constraint. The hiring manager said, "We need someone who understands what it's like when systems fail you." I stared at the screen, pulse steady. "I do," I typed back. When the offer came, I didn't call my father. I didn't need to. I told Eleanor. She smiled and said, "Good. Build something that can't be taken." Russell tried to contact me twice after the court proceedings. Once by text, an awkward apology full of passive language. Once by email, insisting we should move forward as a family. I didn't respond. Howard explained later that silence, in this case, wasn't avoidance. It was a boundary. 1 year later, my apartment looked lived in, not like a showroom. There were plants on the windowsill I somehow hadn't killed. A framed photo of my mom on a shelf, not hidden, not protected from the world like a wound. Just present. Eleanor came over for brunch. Not a fundraiser, not a performance, just brunch. She brought pastries from a bakery she liked and pretended it was no big deal. She sat at my table and ate slowly, like she was practicing being in peace. Evan stopped by too. He looked older in a good way, less polished, more real. Leah came with him. We weren't a perfect, stitched-together thing, but we were honest. Russell wasn't invited. Not as punishment, as consequence. He had repaid the full $85,000. The money sat in my savings account like a quiet, strange monument. I used some of it for my knee rehab and basic security. I invested the rest carefully, with Howard's guidance, under structures that didn't rely on anyone else's management. Russell's karma wasn't cruel. It was proportional. He lost access to Eleanor's estate. He lost board roles. He lost the ability to speak for other people. And the best part, the part I didn't know I wanted until it happened, was that he lost the version of me who would keep swallowing pain to preserve the illusion of family. That version of me was gone. Eleanor looked around my apartment, sunlight pooling on the floor, and she said quietly, "This is what I meant when I wrote that note." I nodded. "I know." She reached across the table and touched my hand lightly. "I'm sorry you had to become hard," she said. I shook my head. "I didn't become hard," I said. "I became exact." Howard would have liked that. Exactness is how you win without yelling. Before Eleanor left, she paused at the door and looked back at me. "Promise me something," she said. "What?" "If anyone ever tries to tell you that you're asking for too much," she said, "you'll check the paperwork." I smiled, small and real. "I will." So here's my question for you. What would you do if you found out a family member stole money meant to change your life and they'd been living comfortably on your silence? Would you confront them privately, or would you do it where they can't rewrite the story? If you want more stories like this, where justice comes from receipts, filings, and quiet power, hit subscribe and take care of yourself the way you wish someone else had.